Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History Spiritual Quest. We've got a special one today because we're going to be looking at a very famous rock and roll group connected to Elvis. And we're going to do that as soon as we come back from this song, Cross on the Circle. Hi, Gun. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, "It's a good omen, and a dream again." At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain, white as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trials and porch light rides, the hand-picked heart to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land, it's grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home, come home, where the cross stands long. Come and share the love of all. Oh, come and share the love of all.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear echoes about Elvis from a supergroup. But first we're going to spiral into the spiritual text that we're here to look at, the same one that Elvis read, the King James Version of the book of John, fourth book of the New Testament. We're in chapter 12. We're at verse 42. We are looking for the resonance that this text has with the Impersonal Life, which was a book that Elvis loved. He annotated many copies, and he handed them out to people that he felt needed the message that was in the book of the Impersonal Life. We've spent a lot of episodes. I think this is episode 105. We've been looking at these two books and the resonance between them, as well as other artifacts with spiritual resonance from Elvis, including words he wrote. In this chapter, Jesus has entered Jerusalem. He's been talking to the people. He's left so that they can come to terms with the message that he's delivered. And some people believe in him, some people don't. You know, miracles strengthen faith, but they don't create faith. There were miracles happening. And in verse 42, it says, "Nevertheless, among the chief rulers also many believed on him. But because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue." So there were people in society who had power. That's what rulers means. And chief rulers means they're the top power. They've got the most. And some of these people, many, believed on him. Not a few, not less than the majority, probably more than enough to make a majority. Many believed on him. But the Pharisees, who are the religious leaders of the area, so these other chief rulers, they're not the religious leaders, they're secular authority or secular power. The religious power said, this is not the Christ. Do not tell people that he is, or honor him in any way. And so they did not confess him. Now, there are a lot of generous reasons that we may give to them for why they did not confess him, but ultimately they're afraid they're going to be thrown out of the synagogue. And the synagogue is it's the center of power in Judea. If you're not in the synagogue, not part of it, nobody's going to do business with you if you're a Jew. Now, if you're a Roman or something, yeah, they'll do business with you, but not in the same way. You're not going to be able to keep your secular power in the Jewish community if you're not in the synagogue. But then in verse 43, it says, "For they loved the praise of men more than they loved the praise of God." So the Bible gives us the exact reason that these men would not praise Jesus, even though they believed in him, even though they saw that he was the Christ. They were clouded, is the way that Joseph Benner might put it. They had a fog, and that particular fog was the love for the praise of men. Some people are fogged by money. We saw a young man who had a lot of money come to Jesus and ask how he could have eternal life. He was told to give away all of his money. We've seen that Judas has some issue with money. But money's not the universal lesson here. It's just a universal symbol of fog. Many, many, many people are fogged by money or greed or something like that. In this case, it's the love for the praise of men. And Big Money Mike's saying he's got a Graceland edition of the Impersonal Life, and he also likes The Prophet by Khalil Gibran and has that too. We've looked at several of those pages, Mike, so if you didn't see those episodes, you might like to see them if you seek them out of the archive. It's under the live section on the channel. And Jen says she has to look into the Impersonal Life, but she does like The Prophet. And Elizabeth says she'd like to get both of those books. Well, they're all available for free. Because both of those books are in the public domain. So if you want a physical copy, you certainly have to pay for it. But you can find the free copies out there on the internet. Plus, eventually, I'm going to publish an edition of the Impersonal Life that has everything we're talking about condensed into it. And here in verse 44, Jesus cried and said, "He that believeth on me, believeth not on me, but on him that sent me." So we've seen Jesus weep previously. He wept for Lazarus. He wept for the people who were weeping for Lazarus. And here he's crying. So I guess that cried could be that he cried out, as in he raised his voice like a town crier. But I think it's saying that he wept. And that he's sad because we've got these men who are clouded even though they can see where alignment is. These chief rulers, they see the light coming through the fog, and yet they create more fog to block it out because they love the praise of men. Or they purposely misorient. But for whatever reason, they can't remain aligned. And this hurts Jesus, and he says, "He that believeth on me believeth not on me, but on him that sent me." So this is a reference to the illusion that Joseph Benner keeps talking about, that the truth is unity, that love is the building block of the universe, that unity is love, that Jesus is love, that God is love, that love and unity have sent Jesus, that we're all part of that together, and him that believes in unity, well, they believe in the truth. That's on him that sent me, that we are all a divine shard and all a part of God. Jesus is saying that people who are aligned, well, they're able to glimpse the truth. And that's the belief that even when they become misaligned, the knowledge, the belief that the unity is there, it doesn't disappear. And that's what helps bring them back to alignment. And in 45 it says, "And he that seeth me, seeth him that sent me." I think Benner and I think Elvis would agree. This is saying that if you see God, you see unity. If you see unity, you see God. If you feel the love, the resonance of love, you're feeling the resonance of God. And so the person that can discern that Jesus is the Christ, they're able to discern that love is what's driving the universe. And they're able to communicate with God in alignment. That's the other thing that Joseph Benner is trying to push, is that once you are aligned, the conduit of communication can grow, can become more open, that you can not just hear what God is sending to you, you can send messages back, you can have a two-way conversation, that you can access, as if it was the divine internet, all the knowledge of God, just as we access nearly all the knowledge of man through the internet here on Earth. That you've got unlimited data speed. But you can't hold it all. Just like your computer or your phone can't hold all of the knowledge of mankind, it's simply a doorway so that we can access what we need when we need it. And in verse 46, "I come a light into the world." And so I just want to pause on light. We talk about light a lot in this series. And I've put forth the thought that Elvis, he had a lantern of faith. And that's a light. And that those who are fogged and misaligned, sometimes in their turning, they can see your light, or in this case, Elvis's light, his lantern of faith. And they will swarm towards that lantern of faith because that's the only light they can see, like moths to a flame. And then Elvis was able, through the strength of his light, to illuminate many paths, all of which will eventually lead to the sheepfold or unity. Each person's got to choose their own. And he's also able to share that faith in a way that strengthened the lanterns, or unshuttered the lanterns of those who sought him in the darkness, so that they could move forward and find the source of Elvis's light, which was the love from God, or the I am in your heart, is the way that Joseph Benner puts it. Because that's where we communicate with God inside ourselves. I am a light, I am come a light into the world, that whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. And Joseph would tell us the darkness is the fog, or whatever it is that keeps us from seeing the light. Could be a curtain. Could be a mask, like the mask of personality, which has slipped and shifted, or the eye slits have become so small we can no longer see the light. It's whatever it is that causes that darkness that's causing the misalignment. And that once you are aligned and you can see the light from God, you do not live in darkness. You don't abide there. And in 47, and if any man hear my words and believe not, I judge him not. For I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. So Jesus says earlier that he was the shepherd. And when he is the shepherd at the entrance to the sheepfold, which is really the position of the porter, that discernment is required, which is a kind of judgment. It's not exactly judgment. It's just being able to see the truth. And that he's able to recognize sheep in wolves' clothing. And he doesn't let them into the sheepfold, because that's a place of safety for the sheep, of relative safety. But when he is the shepherd out in the world looking for the lost sheep, he's not judging any of the sheep. It's not the time for judgment. It's the time for gathering. The shepherd doesn't go out and find the sheep that's fallen into the ravine and say, oh, you are the dumbest sheep in the whole flock. Look what you've done. You can't ever do this again. Shame, shame, shame on you for being down there. There's no time for that. The shepherd has to go down and save the sheep. And it doesn't matter if that particular sheep is wearing the wolf's clothing at the bottom of the ravine. That Jesus came to save everyone. He's here to gather the flock. He's not distinguishing who is in the flock. He's saying it's everyone. Everyone who is a piece of God. And that's everyone, because all of us that have free will are a divine shard, a piece of the divine. I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. He's talked to us about judgment before, about throwing stones in glass houses. The Pharisees have brought to him passages out of the Old Testament saying that these are instructions to judge. He hasn't really argued with that. He hasn't said they're not instructions to judge. He says, I'm not judging. I'm not here to do that. That's not the purpose of this lesson. And that you are confusing things that were said in the Old Testament with what you need to learn from me today. And in 48, he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one that judgeth him. So a person that rejecteth me, let's go back up into verse 42. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers also many believed on him, but they did not confess him, for they loved the praise of men. In other words, they rejected him. They saw the truth, they rejected the truth in preference of walking into their own solitude, as Joseph Benner would put it. And now Jesus in number 48 is talking directly about them. He that rejecteth me, that's those men, and others that rejecteth him, but he's using this as a specific example, and receiveth not my words. These men heard him, and they let his words slip past them, because they have one that judgeth him. These people are being judged by the Pharisees with mortal secular consequences that will result from the judgment. So he's defining these people very specifically. This is exactly what they did. They rejected him. They received not his words because they rejected him. And they're doing this because they have the fog that they've created because of others who judged them. And he's saying in 47, I don't judge people. You don't have any fog because of Jesus. God does not create fog. You create fog in yourself. It's not a bad thing. It's necessary sometimes. The bad part is believing the fog is the reality. And 48 says, the word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. So I believe this is a reference to the day that your mortal shell is cast aside. And that's the moment that unity becomes clear to you, but it's not just unity, it's everything you did to keep everyone else out of unity. It's every rejection that you ever had of unity that you broadcast aloud and tried to convince others of in a malicious way. I mean, we've all done it in a childish way, an innocent way, the way where we're reveling in our mortal and secular selves, just as the bird that's been pushed from the nest that just learned to fly. That's going on through our whole lives. We're learning little pieces of how to fly differently, and we get sucked into that. But there's other times where we lean into it and we try to drag others into a feeling of solitude that we have. We all know people or historical individuals that we would say are evil. And their evil was really about separating others from unity. And this is saying that God never, Jesus, this is not saying that Jesus or God ever judges somebody. The same shall judge him. The word that's been given, the knowledge that's been internalized, the love that was given to you by God, it will be so clarifying that your own actions will be so terrible for you to see that it will shame you and cause you to turn away from God and into your own solitude. It will take you longer to work your way back to unity. That is the judgment that Joseph Benner hints at. And so The same is really your own divine shard, shall judge you on the last day. That's your last mortal day. And then that's going to determine the length of your trip back to unity, which will be a self-imposed exile. And in verse 49, for I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me. He gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. I think better if Jesus was a normal human being, would say that this is the conduit inside us that's opened through alignment. And that the love coming through is telling Jesus what to say, that's the commandment, and what to speak. It's giving him the knowledge like the divine internet. Now, Jesus actually is God and the Father and the Holy Ghost. So he's all three at once. So it's not quite the same for him, but he's modeling for us that you can feel this commandment and knowledge of what you should speak inside yourself. And this is what he's doing, and that's why the others recognize it. That's why those rulers, they recognized that he was the Christ, but they could not bring themselves to say that he was, because they had a lot of fear about what was going to happen to their secular selves. And in verse 50, and I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Whatsoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak. Now, Joseph Benner might interpret this line to be, I know that his commandment is unity. That everything God says is love and unity. That is the basis of what he gives us. That the light that he sends to us is the pure, unadulterated white light of love. That is life everlasting. We filter it here on earth as if we were a film strip in order to bring specific meaning forth that other shards can then integrate into themselves. But the pure white light is life everlasting, constantly coming through us. And then Jesus says, whatever I speak, the Father said unto me, so I speak it. In your own alignment, in your communion with God, he will say things to you, and those are the things that you will repeat. That the knowledge that comes from the divine internet is being given for a reason, not to hoard, but to give to others. And that brings us to the end of chapter 12 of the book of John, fourth book of the New Testament. Let's spiral over into a picture of a young man who's sitting in a chair. He's got a thin tie on, a white button-down shirt. Now, I did AI color this picture, so don't depend too heavily on the colors, but I do believe he was wearing blue jeans. I think he's wearing boots, but you can't quite see them in the picture. Do any of you recognize this young man? He's got a vest on as well. So not a suit, and he's wearing jeans, but he's also wearing a suit vest. And he's got a handkerchief sticking out of the pocket of the suit vest. So it's definitely an interesting outfit that I might almost say was a 1980s outfit. Now, this picture is not from the 1980s. This is at latest from sometime in the very early 60s, but I think this is the very late 50s. So if you know who he is, put it into the chat or into the comments. Let me know. I am going to reveal now who he is. So I think a lot of you, well, maybe not. There was a small little one-hit wonder group out of the 1960s, out of Liverpool, England. They were named the Beatles. Not sure if anyone's ever heard of them. But they had a few, hits out there. They did meet Elvis one time. Most people who know the Beatles, they have heard that there was a fifth Beatle. And that was a drummer that played with the band before Ringo Starr. We all know that Ringo Starr is the drummer of the Beatles now. I mean, because we all know that the Beatles are John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. This guy on the screen is not any of those four people. But there was a fifth Beatle, a guy who played the drums. His name was Pete Best. This is not Pete Best. However, this is a Beatle. He was in the band. And in fact, he is the second Beatle. You could say he's the sixth Beatle, but in truth, he is the second Beatle. Ringo is the sixth Beatle. The Beatles are John Lennon's band. Now, a lot of people may not understand that that's how the band started. But when he was in high school, John Lennon loved Elvis, could not stop talking about Elvis. John lived with his aunt who raised him, and he drove her crazy talking about Elvis. When he graduated high school, he didn't really know what he wanted to do. And he was really drifting, but he enrolled in an art school, mostly because this young man went there, who was John Lennon's best friend. This is Stuart Sutcliffe. Stuart went to the art school because he is and was an amazing artist. He was like a Michelangelo in the making. And Jen said she did know of Pete Best, but not this one. Nobody in the chat seemed to know this was Stuart or has heard of Stuart. So Stuart was John Lennon's best friend at this time in his life. And John, he loved Stu. And they did everything together. And everything John did he thought, hey, I'm bringing Stu into this with me. And he was going to this art school and learning how to paint because of Stu. But John's artistic leanings were really about writing, about lyrical formats, and about music. But he didn't understand that about himself yet. He learned those things kind of through Stu. And when John finally formed the band, Stuart was the first guy he asked. And Stuart was the bass player, so he was basically the Bill Black of the group. But Stuart didn't know how to play bass. They made a bass out of like, I don't know if it was an old wash tub or a big box or something, but the way that they would have done it over in America in the old days. And even though they loved Elvis, they were really getting into this thing, I think it was called skiffle, which was a kind of music that was coming out of Liverpool, and it kind of ran all over England, but it never made it over to the United States. But it used the bass in this way, and a lot of people would use a homemade bass. Eventually, Stuart bought an electric bass guitar, and that's why he got to be the bass player. He was the only person that could afford the bass. And that's why they let him keep playing bass, even though he couldn't play it. They couldn't afford the instrument. and they needed a bass player to be a real band. And I've put Stuart's correct spelling of his name into the chat, and Elizabeth's saying that she has heard of him, and was just wondering how to spell his name. So Stuart, he was the only guy that had any money because his family had some money, and that's why he got to go to the art school too. John had to work it out in a different means, but eventually John wants the band to become bigger, to get more experience, and he works out some deals that they can go to Hamburg, Germany and play. And while they're in Hamburg, Stuart here, he meets a woman. But before we get there, let's hear from Brian Biggs, who is the artistic director of Bluecoat, which is Liverpool's Center for the Contemporary Arts, where since the 1980s, Brian has curated numerous exhibitions and events at the intersection of the contemporary visual arts, performance, literature, and music. So I don't know if Brian is still the artistic director, but at some point he made this statement. Sutcliffe was the first to bring rock and roll records into the art school. Until then, the bastion of traditional jazz, Sutcliffe had involved in the art school dances and brought a cool US-inspired image to the college with a dress sense and style based in part on James Dean. So when Stuart here, who you can see is a cool dresser, when he showed up at the art school, and they're not talking about John Lennon, who was tagging along with him, it's Stuart that the other artists look to and go, wow, he's bringing in this rock thing that none of us thought meant anything. And look how cool he dresses. He reminds us of James Dean. Stuart, this is what else Brian said. Stuart painted listening to Elvis records. Yet in all his sketchbooks, there appears to be only one reference to pop music and one 1957 color drawing of Elvis. Compositionally, it pastiches Mondrian and the Cubists and depicts Elvis surrounded by guitars, jiving figures in the titles of some of his hits. So Elvis inspired Stuart. He listened to him while he created art, and he did create a piece about Elvis. And here is that piece. Stuart created this in 1957, and it's called Elvis. Brian is referring to it as a color drawing. It is an oil on canvas. So this is a painting. So let me know if you can see Elvis in it. You can definitely see guitars. You can see a guy playing the guitar. You can see Blue Moon. You can see Heartbreak Hotel. You can see rock and roll. And Jen says that she's forgot about Stuart, but that she did know of him. Now, Brian had said this is Mondrian, who I guess that's an artist I'm not familiar with. We're going to have to look into him now, I'm sure. I think the Mondrian is the squares, all the rectangles and squares that are all over it. And then the Cubists, well, that's each square is showing like a different perspective. So you're trying to see all the perspectives at once, but all separated into this very organized structure of rectangles. And so this is how the Beatles saw Elvis Presley in 1957. Now, Pauline Sutcliffe, who is Stuart's sister, she said, we were all on the cusp of the 60s. And I swear few could have ever predicted the social revolution that was to follow, that we were indeed to be all shook up. We had no idea. So she's pointing out that when Stewart painted this picture, they were all living through the changes that were to express in the 1960s. And that even though those expressions are hinted at in this kind of picture, they're going to blossom in the next 10 years. And that none of them could have expected it. And Jen says this is an abstract Elvis. That's true. This is abstract. And Elizabeth says that she can see it's a man, but she can't see specifically that it's Elvis. Well, if you look at the top of his head, just off center from the top of his head, in the next rectangle up, there's a crown. Because Elvis is the king. Now, Stewart was not very good at playing the bass. And he was mostly doing it to be part of John's dream. Stewart loved John just like John loved Stewart. They were brothers together, brothers in art. And Stewart really wanted to follow the painting thing, but they were young men. It was summer vacations, basically, when John was working this out for them to go over to Hamburg. They did this a couple of times. Stewart met a beautiful young photographer, and Hamburg is in Germany. Stewart met a beautiful young photographer, Astrid Kircher. And Stewart left the band to be with Astrid. They all went back to England at one point, but Stewart stayed. He actually left his art school to be with this woman. He loved her so much. And they were going to get married. He lived with her. And her mother, I believe. And he began following his dreams of painting and art. But then he began suffering from intense headaches and experiencing acute light sensitivity. And in February 1962, he collapsed in the middle of an art class he was attending, and he was complaining of head pains. German doctors performed tests, but they were unable to determine a cause. He collapsed again on April 10th, 1962. He was taken to a hospital, but he died in the ambulance on the way, which they found to be caused by a brain hemorrhage in the right ventricle of his brain. So he was very young. He was living his dream. He was about to marry the woman of his dreams. And she was left with a broken heart because Stewart passed away. John Lennon did not react well to this death, by which I mean he did not react overtly and externally to the death. People expected that because John was a very emotional person, that he would emotionally respond in a very visible way to this, but instead he shut down. People tried to blame Stewart's death on John, saying that he had beat Stewart once, and this was a result of an injury that John had inflicted on Stewart. So John started to get early on in the Beatles' history, although the claims that he had caused it came after they were famous, really. But he started to experience this same issue with the press, twisting his life around at a moment when he was truly suffering from the death of his friend. But this is also the reason that Paul McCartney played the bass in the Beatles. He was a better bass player to start with, but he would have allowed Stewart to stick in the band forever as well, because Paul loved John. Paul came into the band because of John, and Stewart was a part of John, and Stewart helped make everything possible. So the loyalty would have always been there for Stewart, but Stuart's heart was in the painting. And Astrid pointed him back towards that. And that was the right move for Stuart, I believe, but just didn't work out. But we've still got this picture that you can see. That Stuart created. Now let's move from that. We'll spiral back into our spiritual text. That was kind of a sad story, but it does link the Beatles directly to Elvis in the sense of the effect Elvis is having on the world in 1957. Which is something that we're very close to in the afternoon sessions that I've been doing. We're looking specifically at 1956 now, but we kind of backed up into it from 1957. So this is all what's happening as Elvis pushes out Heartbreak Hotel and Steve Sholes gets it out there for sale. Suddenly it changes the world. But let's take a look at The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner, Chapter 12, Soulmates. And it starts out, "Let us now examine into some of the things I have given you, those especially of which you cannot yet acknowledge me as the giver." So the book says we're going to start another spiral. We're going to again circle ideas that you've not yet accepted. I already know that you haven't accepted these ideas. I know we've looked at them before. But humor me, we're going to move on through them one more time. Now Joseph is speaking as the I am in your heart. So he's also modeling the patience of the divine, that the divine never expects you to understand anything, that the divine recognizes that understanding comes through repetition and through various perspectives and from wrestling with the knowledge. The next passage says, "Perhaps the particular position in life you now occupy, you do not think the best adapted for the expression of my idea surging within you." This is an interesting piece because it says, you're thinking about me, you're thinking about how you could spread your faith, and you're thinking, well, I'm not in a position to spread faith, but if I was in this other position, this is how I would do it. This is actually, I think, a universal expression of all of our dreams. How we handle all of our dreams are thought of in this way. We dream them, and then we, the ones we can't live right away, we hold on to it, thinking that there'll be another time for these when that position in our life will be best adapted to this dream. And that does come true. Like, we actually live like that, and sometimes it is true. At other times, we're just pushing off an idea that we're never going to do. That book that we're never going to write, the one that we've got the great idea for, but that we never do. It's those artistic ideas usually that our fear keeps us from. So I think it's referencing that, but it's also saying that the position that you're at in your life when you understand the ideas that I give you, that is the best position for the expression of the idea. I wouldn't have given the idea to you if you weren't in the correct position. It's your view that you're not in the right position, but I know that you are. I think that's also part of what's being said here. And I also think of a resonance in Elvis's life where he was moving through this spiritual quest with these books that Larry had given him, and he was having a lot of conversations with Larry Geller. And then they started to visit. It was a spiritual place around Los Angeles. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But a spiritual leader lived there, and Elvis started to get the idea that maybe he should become something like a monk at this place, or retire to a similar kind of place and, teach his spiritual thoughts there. That he was having all of these spiritual ideas, but that his position as a superstar wasn't the best particular position to express these ideas. And that particular spiritual leader that he talked to, she told him that she thought maybe it was the best place for him to be as a superstar, that doing what she was doing, that wasn't for Elvis. That wasn't his path. That his path was obviously the superstar path because he was doing it well. And he was reaching so many people. I think Elvis also struggled with the idea that he had not communicated the ideas that had been given to him so clearly in the middle 60s, or at least he thought they were being given to him clearly. So I think part of the struggle is always to realize that what you have done before was just as valuable as what you're going to accomplish in the future, or what you're going to say, because those were the building blocks to reach this spot. And that even though you were not consciously expressing the ideas that you're now clearly aware of, the idea, those my ideas, the ones with these capital my and the capital idea, they're always truth. And they were always there, and you were expressing them, just not consciously. The proof of the expression is the fact that so many have gathered to continue to listen. And Jen says she'll have to look that place up. Yeah, spiritual's in the name of it, I think, but I'm so bad with the names. One day we will walk through that story, though, because it's got a whole bunch of really interesting pieces, including a guy that Elvis used to be in the movies with, who was now a monk at that place, which I think kind of put the idea into Elvis's head, hey, maybe I could do this too. And Gunn says, lucky for us, he stayed a superstar. Did Larry give him other ideas? So Larry didn't specifically give Elvis that idea. Elvis came to it after visiting with that spiritual leader. I think Larry, I think he was somewhat horrified at the idea that Elvis would stop being a superstar and that he might have caused it. So I don't think Larry ever tried to talk Elvis out of being famous or being Elvis. But he did give him a lot of various perspectives. And I kind of think what Larry was doing that he doesn't realize, and Larry's got a brand new book out, so maybe he does. Maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about, and Larry will explain things to us much more clearly in his new book. Or maybe he explained things clearly in his other books, and I just didn't think so. So, again, my opinions are always, it's been a while since I gave the disclaimer. My opinions are always my opinions, and everybody's opinion here is welcome. And I am in no way shaming or discrediting Larry, but I think Larry was the foil for Elvis, that Elvis saw Larry as a person who was not a believer. And that, in a way, Larry was like one of Elvis's projects, and he was going to keep hammering away till he found the vocabulary and the way to express it that convinced even Larry to become a Christian or to follow him into Christianity. I don't think that ever happened. So I'm not sure that it was Larry that was influencing Elvis. I think Elvis was taking every idea Larry brought to him, every perspective, and finding the right way to approach that perspective to bring the light of faith, the lantern of faith. And Gunn says, but did Larry, there's a feeling that Larry messed with his brain. And I'm not saying that's not untrue either. Obviously, when you're exposed to the ideas, there's some danger that you'll fall in love with the idea, even if it's fogging to your alignment, and you'll continue to follow that idea into solitude. That's definitely a danger. I just feel like Elvis was always too grounded, mostly because of Gladys. He would never walk away from Gladys. And Gladys is inside his heart with the I am. So that's where Elvis is always facing. Elvis isn't afraid to walk into these dark places because he has a very strong lantern, and he never loses sight of where the lantern's source comes from. That might not be correct. He may falter in his sight. Even Peter faltered. But he has a way inside himself and a practice to realign. That's his meditation. Big Money Mike says, Self-Realization Fellowship. He's brought the right words into the chat. That is the place that Elvis went to. Self-Realization Fellowship. And now we've come up on the end of another hour, so we're going to leave it here. And I'm going to close with a song like I always do. And Gunn points out that one can be led easily into the wrong way. That is true. The wrong way is seductive. And we've been looking at that the fog is seductive, that it's a pleasurable fog, that it is easy to walk in the wrong way. I just think that Elvis had a strong practice of being able to realign, to come back to alignment, that he was able to be still and know I am God. Now, did he remember to be still? I think that's the tricky part for all of us. That's where you're going the wrong way, is when you look up at some point and think, I can't even remember the last time I was still. And so I'm going to close out here with a song, and this will be He Carried Light. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today, either live or in the replay. And be sure that you've hit that like button so this message makes it out to more people. And that you've subscribed so you know when Hillbilly Cat History is on the air. And that you tell other people so that they don't have to depend on YouTube to bring the message to them. They can join us here at Hillbilly Cat History every day, 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all for being here. This is He Carried Light. You all keep on taking care of business.
In the margins of the pages his voice still speaks, whispers of longing, of love that seeks. Lisa saw the notes, every thought, every prayer, a father's searching heart still breathing there. To do your will in my purpose he wrote, a bridge of devotion, a living note. Through the Bible's lines, through the books he kept, the light of his spirit forever swept. Like a bridge through the troubled night, he carried love, he carried light. Every word, every song, every plea was a path to unity. He showed the way and we will follow, through joy, through pain, through each tomorrow. The unseen hand, the guiding flame, love eternal in his name. Delta held the book with gold on its face, the impersonal life, his sacred place. Larry gave the gift, and Elvis was changed. New doors opened, horizons rearranged. He is within us at all times, he said. A chorus of hope where the faithful are led. Fans sent their prayers, their Bibles, the song, and Elvis carried their faith along. Like a bridge through the troubled night, he carried love, he carried light. Every word, every song, every plea was a path to unity. He showed the way and we will follow, through joy, through pain, through each tomorrow. The unseen hand, the guiding flame, love eternal in his name. Show me the way and I will follow. His voice was a prayer through joy and sorrow. The road to seek and never ends. His journey became the gift of friends. From cousin to co-star, from friend to kin, the spirit he carried was shared within. I will sing his praises for all to hear, a song of salvation, a love sincere. Like a bridge through the troubled night, he carried love, he carried light. Every word, every song, every plea was a path to unity. He showed the way and we will follow, through joy, through pain, through each tomorrow. The unseen hand, the guiding flame, love eternal in his name. There's got to be a reason, he said, a purpose unseen, a life spirit led. And through the notes, the prayers, the song, his bridge of love still carries on.